we can bring that up again if you want. I'd like that. I mean, you can say what you can say. Hi guys, we're live. Sorry for the delay today, but we wanted to get all of us together to talk about what happened yesterday and the playoffs. So we appreciate you guys hanging out and waiting for us. Then there was also a fake HockeyBuzzCast video posted because the first one I posted just got stuck up in Google land, so I had to repost it. So this one's working, and we're all here. So yeah, let's get going.
Where is Google Land? Is that west of Never Never Land?
Yes, it is. It's actually in Sunnyvale, California. The funny story is when I was engaged to my wife, she at the time, let me get rid of that, which is going on right now. Sorry. When I was engaged to my wife, she was working in an office in Sunnyvale, California, and Google was a small little company, and we actually played them. I went out there and I played soccer goalie for my wife's team against Google. It was a small little company. We went out to dinner with a bunch of them afterwards. We hung out at the bar. It was like this adult soccer league that was going on. Yahoo was in it. PayPal was in it. This is like 17 years ago, right? So this is a long time back. And so all these guys that we played soccer with then are billionaires. You know, I'm sure they're just these are the early people at these companies. And the office my wife had then is now part of the Googleplex. That whole area was just swallowed up by Google, so it's not even there anymore. Where I used to pick her up from work.
Wasn't Sunnyvale, California, the location of the computer from the movie War Games?
Yes. Yeah.
That's what I thought.
It's not. Sunnyvale is there's a road called El Camino out there. I don't know if anybody you've been out there or not, but El Camino Drive, which runs basically, it kind of parallels the interstate. And it is the longest strip mall in history. Like, it just runs forever. Like, literally, you drive along, and you'll pass every 3 or 4 minutes. You'll pass a Jack in the Box. You'll pass the Jamba Juice. You just keep going. It's just continuing, and you really feel like you're in this infinite loop forever. And it's an incredible. It's like the biggest strip mall I've ever seen. My other great memory of Sunnyvale was the first day I went out there to visit my wife. I got in my cab and I took a cab to her place, and we were just dating at the time, so it was really like a risky move. And I'm going out to visit this girl. I've known her since I was in 2nd grade, but I'm like, this is gonna be scary. So I'm in a cab, and the first thing I see is a naked guy running down the street right in front of her place, just buck naked, running as fast as he can, like he's being chased by a dog. And he's just running as fast as he can, and then literally like. You count at 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 3 cops on foot, right after, and just bam, right after him.
Was it Will Ferrell, and did he have a bucket of chicken?
No, but it was that scene. It really was. It was hilarious. And I said, she's like, so how was your trip in? I'm like, oh, it was interesting. I saw a naked guy running out front of your place, being chased by police. And when I'm dating, I don't know what kind of person you are, but I don't date people like. So anyways, it was a good icebreaker at the time. All right, let's get going.
Speaking of, first impressions and gun police chases, my first trip to New York that I ever made, I took the subway in from the Newark airport, and as God is my witness, I got off the train and there was a dead guy lying there. A true story. And on that same day, there was a police chase that ran right by me. The guy just ran right by me, and seconds later with guns drawn. This was my first trip ever to.
Oh my God!
Welcome to New York.
Yeah.
Welcome to New York.
Was that when Ed Koch was mayor?
Well, it was a long time ago, so I don't even. Yeah, I would guess he was the mayor.
I always think of the Simon & Garfunkel in Central Park concert whenever I think of Ed Koch as mayor.
Oh, you mean when Paul Simon sang a song about John Lennon and some disgruntled Beatles fan jumped on stage?
No. I remember he's like thanking like Art Garfunkel comes out and thanks the people who are smelling the marijuana or selling the marijuana to people. He's like, thanks for all of you who are selling the marijuana today. We appreciate it. This is of course not legal. And he's like, I would also like to thank Mayor Ed Koch.
Well.
Oh my gosh, just so much fun, so much fun.
Well, let's get talking.
All right, let's begin the show. Here we go. May 2nd, Friday.
May 22nd.
May 22nd. We'll do that one. Let's do May 22nd show today. May 2nd.
I'd like to do a redo of these last 20 days. So if we can go back.
Yeah.
All right, let's start it. Let's start it again. Let's go back. I need the time to get ready.
I do too. I got books due. I got things going on. I need the 20 days back.
20 days. Imagine if you could get 20 days. Just like, here's 20 days to do with whatever you want. That would be something. All right.
Well, I'd write down today's lottery numbers so I could go back and buy the ticket.
Yeah, you would cheat the system, Mike. I'm not surprised.
I need
No, Mike would be a cliche, Mike. You would not be a cliche.
Yes. I would, take a walk with my family, hang out, and then do the lottery thing. But first, take a walk with my family. All right, here he goes. Hello, Hockey World. It's Friday. It's May 22nd, 2015.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Ty Anderson.
And I'm Kevin Allen of USA Today Sports.
And I am Eklund, and you're watching the HockeyBuzzCast on HockeyBuzz.com and listening on Alpha Geek Radio and AlphaGeekRadio.com. Maybe watching there too. Who knows? But the story is, here we are today. Kevin, we didn't have you yesterday or the last couple of days. We haven't had you since the whole Babcock thing came out. We're tweeting you, though. When we were on the air 2 days ago, you were the first to say, he's not going back to Detroit, and we put that out there. But in retrospect, what's this whole thing been like for you? How's this situation gone down in your mind?
Well, the fascination for me is why my readership really can't come to grips with the idea that there are no ulterior motive here. It's and there's nothing sinister. It's as simple as that. At some point, the money becomes so incredibly outrageous that you have to accept the offer. And as I've said, it doesn't take much to determine in your own life what amount of money would prompt you to do almost anything. And if I said to Ty that I'm starting a waste management company and I would give him $450,000 a year for the next 8 years to come in and haul waste for me, I bet he would do it. Just because that is a...
Ty, you up for this? I mean, I think Kevin just made a proposal. It's an rather interesting proposal.
I'm in. I'm always in.
It's a life-altering amount of money, and we all have that amount of money, and that's what Mike Babcock was offered, was a life-altering amount of money. Like he's making $2 million a year in Detroit, and that's real money, but after taxes and so forth, it's what is it, 1.3 or 1.4 that he really has, and he's so it's not the same as getting 6.25. And the other element that I think is lost, and I know some people have talked about it, but not enough, is that this contract is fireproof, and by that I mean he has all the power. Like Mike Babcock has the biggest hammer any NHL coach has ever had. He can do what he wants, say what he wants, do exactly what he wants. Because what are they going to do? Fire him? They're not. You're not going to fire a guy. He's going to. He's in complete control. He has all the power, and no NHL coach has ever been in that position before, where he, basically can call his own shots. Because in the first few years of that contract, there is no way that they're going to fire him.
Oh yeah. No, he is absolutely safe, and I mean, it is so much money. There were a couple things that I really liked about it, Kevin, that I thought, it was kind of cool that I didn't know his one kid was getting out of school, is ending school right now, and so he's an empty nester. I mean, so what an exciting thing to do with your wife, like move to Toronto with all that money. I mean, that's not a terrible thing to do. I've talked to you about it before. I think you have the same idea that my wife and I have had, that we're going to one day live we'd like to one day live in New York City for 1 year. We've talked about that. Yeah. Just like 1 year in a major city. We've always been in the suburbs, and it would be fun to have some money and live in the city for 1 year. Or, for his case, maybe, longer than that. But still, I mean, I'm sure they're keeping their house in Detroit, and everybody can go back there on holidays and do all their things and all that stuff.
The fair question to ask, though, is, why Toronto over the Buffalo Sabres, when the Sabres were really the better opportunity in terms of the roster they will have in a couple of seasons. Like, we all know how messy the Maple Leafs roster situation is and what a long-term project that is. And the money was similar. He could have gotten life-altering money from Terry Pegula as well.
Right.
Not quite what Toronto was offering, but in the neighborhood. I guess I like the fact that I've known and I've said before that Mike Babcock is a proud Canadian, and I think he showed that by saying that he wanted to be part of the group that's going to transform the Maple Leafs into their first Stanley Cup winner since 1967.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't know. I think that is a fair question. Obviously, the Buffalo people were angry about it, or some of them were. But the GM came out, Tim Murray came out and said that it was fine, that everything went fine. He did come out and say that, right, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I interpreted Tim Murray's comments as the organization's saving face. I mean, the reporters that asked the questions to Babcock at the press conference yesterday, based their questions on information that they got from the Sabres organization or from their sources inside the Sabres organization. So,
right.
At that point, I'm sure that the hierarchy of the Sabres was a little upset that they thought that they had a deal with Babcock, and it ended up that, you don't have a deal until it's signed on the dotted line. And he clearly indicated to them that he wanted to talk it over with his family, that the offer was on par with what Toronto had offered them. In fact, I mean, Babcock said in the press conference yesterday in the media scrum is that Toronto actually offered him more years. They offered him 10 years. And
Buffalo did, you mean?
Well, no, he said Toronto did. And
Toronto offered him 10 years.
Yeah, well, and Buffalo may have as well, but Toronto offered him 10 years, and he said, that 8 was, I guess, sufficient, or that, he didn't want to be, he'd be 60 years old after 8 years, and maybe he doesn't want to coach after he's 60. So, I mean, that and I don't know if their money was more or if it was on par, but I think that the fact that it was Toronto and it was the big challenge, and that the ownership and Brendan Shanahan are all in lockstep in doing what they say they want to do, which is the rebuild. And Babcock, from his commentary yesterday, said that's where we're going. So everybody was on the same page. Now, I don't know if 3 months, 6 months down the line that's going to change. I don't think it is, because I think that organization and Shanahan and Babcock will be excoriated by the
One second, Mike. It's very dramatic. This whole thing is very dramatic that you're saying, and I just wanted to put some heavy music underneath it, just to.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I tried my best to make that.
I need background music. But no, that if they decided to deviate from that plan,
right,
the Toronto media and the Toronto fan base would destroy Brendan Shanahan and the organization, because they've done this before. So I think them coming out in such a public way in this media conference is going to make this team stick to their plan.
I want to get into this again. Because we got into it yesterday. I wanted to get Kevin's opinion on this, because I have some real issues with that press conference yesterday. But Ty, what are your thoughts on this whole thing as it's played out?
I mean, it's the perfect opportunity, right? I mean, unless the Montreal Canadiens came calling, I can't think of a team that has more publicity than the Toronto Maple Leafs. And even then, the Maple Leafs, I know people took it yesterday, but they are Canada's team in terms of their media coverage. There's nothing quite like it. It is probably the closest thing we have, I think, to the Red Sox or the Yankees in terms of just the constant eyes on this team and on this fan base. And I think that this is a situation where he can go in and he's honest about it. He's saying we're not going to win the cup. It's going to be a process. There will be pain, which I thought that was a great quote. But I think that this is a perfect situation for him. He's won gold with Canada, and what would make him a greater sort of hockey icon than to win gold with Canada and then to break a 50-year cup drought for the Toronto Maple Leafs? I can't think of anything that's better for him. So Buffalo was a great opportunity, I'm sure, especially with their future. Jack Eichel's going to be there soon. We all assume. So I look at that and I say, yeah, it was a great opportunity, but the sort of the stamp he can put on his legacy, as an NHL coach and as a head coach just in hockey in general, between Team Canada, Detroit, and now Toronto, can really be unmatched, I think, in this era of hockey, and I think that's too good of an offer for him to pass up, really.
And the one thing that he said, that Babcock said yesterday, that I thought was very illuminating, was the fact that and this is from his mouth. Randy Carlyle played 1,000 games in the NHL, won the Norris Trophy, and won the Stanley Cup. And he said he's a great coach. But in the end, it's not about the coach. It's about the players. And if this organization doesn't get the players that they need for a coach like a Babcock or like a Carlisle to be successful, this is an exercise in futility. So that's why this rebuild has to happen. That's why they have to clear out a significant portion of this roster. And I think that part of the plan is that there's not going to be this thing where Kessel and Phaneuf and maybe Bozak and a few others are going to be around to see whether Babcock can get more out of them, because they're going to be gone before the first training camp even comes to fruition.
Right, Kev?
Maybe.
Maybe, right.
Yeah, like I don't think that's easily accomplished. I think this is going to be in stages. I think that's the point that I took out of that. I mean, I could be wrong, but it's hard to just go out and to move, Phil Kessel on Tuesday and Phaneuf on Wednesday and Bozak on Thursday and Bernier on Friday. That's not easily done. It takes some time, and you do have to have put a team out there. And the point I would make is that they may move one of the guys in the summer and one of the guys in the trade deadline, or maybe three guys this summer. But I thought that's what he was saying with the pain is that this is just starting, So I think it's just going to take some time to get it to where they want it. And the other point I would bring out is, don't rule out Babcock having some modest success as the rebuild goes on.
Yeah, that's my thing.
That's what he does.
Right. I mean, he's taken the Detroit team. We've talked about this.
Yeah, I mean, 2013-14, getting that team into the playoffs with, and I remember this specifically. One night he had 13 players from the Grand Rapids team in the lineup. He's capable of getting a lot out of that. But I've got my readers thinking that they're gonna trade 7 guys at the draft, and I just don't think that's gonna happen. I think it'll take some time, and you want to get the most out of them. I think they'd be better off to trade Kessel now and maybe trade Bozak and see what they can get, and then maybe hang on to Phaneuf and move him at the trade deadline. I think that's the way I would do. I would parcel it out. I think that's how you get your best, your best return for those players.
Yeah, no, and I agree, Kevin. And yesterday, so what we talked about yesterday, I want your opinion on this. First of all, I get why they're doing all this. I agree with what Mike's saying on the whole, because I do get why they're acting. But they threw a press conference yesterday to tell the fans to expect pain, and that's all right. And I get it. Like you said, Ty, it's a good quote, and it's like a hard stance against what happened in the past. But this Leaf fan base, they know all about pain, and they know all about losing games. This is not something new to them. You're not telling them this suddenly we're going to lose games and it's going to be painful. This has been painful for a long time. That's this is the beginning of the not being painful part. I mean, yes, it's still going to be painful for a while, but there was so little optimism in that press conference. It was as if they were so on point that this was what they had to say, that we have to lower the expectations as much as possible. We have to show that we're not, no one's going to say anything about a parade, or, and at one point Babcock says, to something like, what, that's what you do when you want to make the playoffs someday, and maybe I don't know, win a playoff round. My gosh, perhaps somewhere down the line, and they were so careful about everything they were saying, and to me that's just, I've never seen a coach being introduced press conference like that. I mean, it felt, and Mike, it felt, Kevin, I just want your opinion on it. It felt illegitimate to me. Did you get any of that at all?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. What I don't like about it is it's for the same reason I hate it when a role player says, when I get a goal, it's a bonus.
Yes.
You know, they say that, you know, it's just a bonus. That's not my job. I'm not a scorer. Well, yeah, you are a scorer. They do pay you to get goals. When you're on the ice, you're supposed to get a goal. You know, and so I never like it when a team comes out and says expect that we're going to be awful.
Yes.
Yeah, you know. So I know what you're saying, and that makes a lot of sense. But you know, I'm sure what their argument would be is we're just trying to be realistic. We don't want and you know, for people to think that Mike Babcock is a miracle worker.
To be realistic without going to that level, though, I mean, there was nothing upbeat about this press conference. It's as if they were coming in to like restructure a country that had just been destroyed in a war, and they're like, it's going to take forever. We're not going to ever have any. We're not going to have any. I mean, Kai, did you get any of that at all?
Well, I always feel in these situations it's better to say, hey, it's going to take time than we're going to win the cup in the first year. And I just think that he's being realistic. And, you know, I feel like with Maple Leafs, it's kind of been flawed over time where you've had a new coach come in and he said all the right things, and then the on-ice products, you look at it and go, oh, I don't think that's going to happen. So I think that it's honestly just playing it safe here. And I think these guys are really transparent yesterday. I think they were really honest in terms of what they were saying. They said this doesn't change the plan, what we have, you know, for the long-term future and what's happening right now. So obviously you have to see if that is in fact the case. A lot of things can change, especially with the coaches as good as Mike Babcock. But I always look at these situations and I just think it's better to be realistic than to be the optimist, because then, you know, if the team struggles out of the gate, they win 3 of their first 10, or they don't make the playoffs, you know, you don't have the angry mob, you know, as angry as it will be, you know, had you guaranteed a postseason berth or a Stanley Cup.
Here. They hired Mike Babcock. You know, they didn't. It's like one thing if they had brought in Guy Boucher, like they were planning on maybe doing, and had this press conference, but they hired the best coach in the world,
right?
And they brought him in and told their fans that they were going to fail for a while, and it's okay, and I get that, but that's the contradiction. It's like they went.
No, it's not. See, that's what I'm saying, Ak. It's not a contradiction if they follow through on what their plan is to significantly downgrade the roster of the team before training camp in September. Because, yes, if you have Mike Babcock there and you have Kessel and Van Riemsdyk and Bozak, he could get more out of that group, and they could earn 10 to 12 more points, and then this team will draft in the teens. The point of this is to strip this down as far as possible, and in spite of having Mike Babcock, being a team that's going to be in the bottom 5 or bottom 7 of the league, and to develop, Brendan Shanahan said in one of the media scrums that he could have very easily gone out and hired some coach, just some nobody or some transitional guy, and been bad for 2 or 3 years and finished 29th or 30th, and drafted first or second in the draft. But that doesn't serve prospects like Morgan Riley and Nazem Kadri and the young players on that team that they're going to potentially build around to develop. They want those players to develop, but they also want to be able to draft young players and have high draft picks. So they're going to try to clear out the roster, and they're going to build around those young players, and Babcock is going to be the one to develop.
So they're expecting one player per year. They're going to lose all these games, and one player per year is going to turn this thing all around. Like that's what they're losing all these games.
It worked so well for the Edmonton Oilers.
Right.
Yeah.
It did.
Well,
this is a disaster waiting to happen. Kevin? Sorry.
Well, here's the problem, Mike, with what your argument is, and I'm saying that no matter how bad of a team you give Babcock, by bringing him in, he's going to make it better.
Yeah. It's an NHL team.
You hired a guy who's a now coach. He's not, he can't coach to lose. So, he's going to make that team, and he's 52 years old.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, he sounds prepared based on what he said for a couple really bad years. He's realistic, and if the plan is the way that Shanahan has laid it out, you're talking about players like, say, David Booth being in the top 6, and young players from the AHL. Not William Nylander, not Connor Brown, who led the Marlies in scoring. they're going to stay down and they're going to get experience in the AHL. But players who have been down there for 2 or 3 years, they will call them up and see if they're NHL players. Give them the opportunity that they haven't been afforded over the last few years with the Leafs. I think that the next couple of years is going to be an exodus of a lot of these players and the opportunity for others that have not had their chance in the NHL to get their chance. But it's not going to be, them being close to a playoff spot, being 4 points out of a playoff spot, and the Leafs deciding to make a run at a playoff spot. They're going to do everything that they can to not be in that position.
No, but there's two things that have been said. Yeah, I agree with that. But there's two things that have been said that I've really liked the past couple of days. Dan Petru came on Tuesday and said this reminds him of the Manchester United in soccer, just going for the greatest, spending the most money they can for the biggest coach on the one hand. And I do agree with that, based on everything that's happened. But I don't know, Kevin, can Mike Babcock play this game that he's talking? I mean, I just don't know that in his heart he can do this. Like, I think that he's talking one side because he's been told that he's got to say we're going to lose, but I don't see how.
Well, no, yeah, that's my only point. Like, he'll make this team a little better than it would be, just because that's what he does, and he'll get the most out of them. You can't change the Leopard spots. Like, he is a confrontational coach who gets in your face and makes you a better player. And I just can't see him not doing that with all the players that he has on his team. He can't coach differently. So, he's going to get the most. These guys are going to get called up, and, he's going to be on them to try to make them better players. And,
Yeah, it's got to play out that way. I mean, that's the only – and I think that what I hated about yesterday is it's like I am so tired, and Ty backed me up on this one. I think you will back me up on this one. And I'm so tired of sitting around with Leaf fans wanting their team to lose. I've had it, I mean, it's just, this is a sport, you don't know what's going to happen. You could get hit by a bus tomorrow. This is a sport. You got to go out there and you got to try to win. The draft is set up to help teams that suck, not teams that try to lose. The draft is not designed for that, and this team does not suck. They were almost a playoff team last year when their coach got fired. Now, you're going to take these players away and you're going to strip them from bad attitudes, and that's fine. But you're still going to end up with a team that is an NHL team. It's not a minor league team. There's still going to be NHL players on this team, and Babcock's going to be coaching NHL players, and yet you're going to have fans that are once again. And I don't think this is actually, I take it back, I don't think it's all the fans. I think it's a few fans. I think most fans actually do want the Leafs to win, and that's sort of what bothered me about yesterday. There's an underlying thing that those people who pay for tickets, I think, do actually cheer when their team scores goals. I've heard that, at least when I've watched the games. I think that there is something that they do actually think that there's some tie. Anything? I'm sorry.
I mean, it's tough. When you have a draft like this year, where there are so many guys that you thought were generational talents between McDavid and Eichel, I mean, not just the beginning, really. You can kind of see why, in a way, you're like, all right, well, if we're gonna lose, let's go all out with it. But at the same time, it was strange to see that sort of switch happened as quick as it did. So I mean, I get it from both sides of it. Here in Boston, they never really had the full rebuild because the fans wouldn't really deal with it. I think they're a bit too impatient here in Boston, especially because all the other teams win. The closest thing I've really seen is the Celtics tried it, and that was tough because it was tough to talk about a team and just be like, well, I hope they lose. It was just it's always a weird discussion. So I find tanking in any sport really strange. I understand it, but it's weird for me, and I think that Toronto is too good of a hockey town for that to be the norm for the next few years. So it's really tough. I'm with you there. I mean,
a couple of points. One, Eck is absolutely right. The draft is based on to help a team like Arizona, who thought they were going to make the playoffs and didn't.
Right.
And then at the end said, well, we weren't going to make it, so we'll just sort of tear it apart. It wasn't designed for what the Buffalo Sabres did.
No.
That's what we don't want to see.
Right.
That's not true. But here's the oddity of this. I don't want to get in a position like it almost sounds like I think this was terrible for the Maple Leafs to do. I think it was tremendous. It was like, they got Mike Babcock is the thing. But the problem with it, and I think the point you're trying to make of that it's a bit odd, is they've hired have hired Babcock essentially to babysit for 2 or 3 years.
Right.
And then he's going to start working. You're going to be a babysitter for a while. See, and Mike Babcock can't babysit.
There's no way. I mean,
yeah, he won't be able. He's not going to be a babysitter. He's going to try to make each of those teams better. So that's the only thing I'm saying is that it'll just be an odd situation that you have the best coach in the league, but you're saying, and that's the other thing. How long will it take, for this to be on? And and the other thing I find amusing is, Mike Babcock's never had a player like Dion Phaneuf. I was trying to think back, but he certainly didn't have one in Detroit. And when he was in Detroit, he wanted Dion Phaneuf.
Right.
Now he's got him, and we're going to move him.
No, he was part of, I was wondering that. I knew there was a schism there, and I was wondering what side he was on. He was on the side that wanted.
That doesn't change the fact that this is an absolutely, great hiring.
Of course.
And it's a good deal. And with Brendan Shanahan, who I know well, and with Mike Babcock, who I know well, and I've seen what he can do, the Leafs are probably in the best position they've been in decades.
Yes, no question about it. And they don't have to apologize for being in that position.
No, but I just think it's just fun to point out all this, this goofiness that it's.
It is fun because they are actually, what they're doing is if they were a friend of mine who broke up with somebody, okay, and broke up with this girl and was dating this other girl, they would be telling the new girl they're dating everything they did wrong with the old girl. And that's what they're doing right now. And I would say, shut the up, just go and be with the new girl. It doesn't matter what happened before. It doesn't change things.
But it does.
It only does because a few people in the media are making it that way.
It does because the fan base has been burned over and over and over by ownership and by management over the years, telling them that they were willing to do a rebuild, and
so
then
we burn them. And what are we going to do? We're telling them that they're going to suck now. We're not going to burn you. We're just flat out telling you that they are going to lose. So you're not going to get burned anymore. Enjoy it. We're going to lose. We're going to be terrible.
And if they stink for 2 years. And if they clear out the players that they think are not players that they want to build around, and young players like Riley and say Kadri show improvement based on what Babcock will do in terms of motivation, in terms of teaching them structure, they may stink. They may be in the bottom 5 of the league, but there will be a hint of hope and progress. And the organization will let their young players mature, play the extra year in junior, play a year or two in the AHL, and do things the right way instead of throwing an 18-year-old like Luke Shen into the NHL, and ruining his career.
Definitely, no question. And they did that, and they made those mistakes. But Babcock is not going to make those mistakes. He's Mike Babcock, right? That's why we bring in the best coach. And it doesn't matter if you have the first pick or the 4th pick overall in the draft with Mike Babcock. Why you have Mike Babcock is so you have great 58th and 74th picks. That's my opinion. Like that's why you have him. The top picks, there's a lot of great talent in coming up now. The top 10 picks for the next 4 or 5 years are going to be good players, at least probably for the foreseeable future.
That's
Calgary. What if they become Calgary, Mike? That's my thing. Like, what if they become Calgary this year, right? Calgary this year is how they should be. Like Calgary dealt Glenn Cross, even though they were in a playoff hunt, but they still dealt him, even though they were in the playoffs. They didn't make any trades to sacrifice their future, and yet they still won, and they still moved forward, and they still, and that, will you be okay with that?
Toronto doesn't have a kid like Monahan to play up the middle. They don't have a game breaker like Goudreau, and they don't have a defenseman of the quality of Giordano. So if they can do it without those 3 aspects, sure, but it's not going to happen.
Well, I mean, my question, and Kevin could touch on this because he knows Babcock, and Mike, you could because you know the Leafs. is Mike Babcock the coach that can get a Van Riemsdyk and a Kessel and a Kadri to take their game to that next level? Because I look at these players and I see skilled players. I don't see bums. So for me, I look at this roster and I say, is this the coach though that can get them to play to that level that many people expect them and want them to play at on a consistent basis?
Kevin,
what do you think?
Yeah. Oh, he could make that team better. He could put that team in the playoffs. There's no question of that. But I don't think this team's good enough to win the cup, and I think that's what we're all. I think that's what the Maple Leafs see. Like, in the long run, this team has no future. Because they don't have, other than Morgan Riley, they don't have, good young players that are going to come in and replace these guys that are, starting to be near the end of their prime and beyond. So, what good would it do to get this team in the playoffs? So, I understand all this. And the only thing is, I just see that it's just going to be kind of funny for a while.
Oh, it's going to be hilarious.
And look, here's the greatest argument, and I think you circled a little bit, but let's just get right down to it. The greatest argument for hiring Babcock is that you are going to be adding these pieces starting now.
Yeah.
Younger players and everything else. So you have Babcock there who is schooling them on what the cool kids call the right way to play.
Right.
Yeah, the right way to play. Mike Babcock is going to be teaching these young guys, and there'll be 2 this year and 2 more next year, and they're all going to know, the Babcock way. And by year 3, they'll hate his guts, but they'll play for him.
And to answer your question quickly, Ty, I think he would make a difference with a guy like Van Riemsdyk. Kadri has had his attitude problems over the years. I think they have 2 years before he's an unrestricted free agent. One of his biggest challenges is to reach Nazem Kadri because he has the ability to play two-way hockey, but he's never been able to be convinced by Ron Wilson, by Peter Horachek, or by Randy Carlyle to play that type of game. Phil Kessel is Phil Kessel. Nobody changes him. He's going to do what he's going to do, and he's good at it. He'll score 30, 35 goals. He'll come in, but I think that is fire and gasoline. That's why I think they have to move Phil Kessel, because I don't think it'll work with Babcock. Babcock will expect him to be a 200-foot player, and Phil Kessel is never going to be a 200-foot player.
I don't know. Will he expect to be a 200-foot player, Kevin, or will Babcock let him do what he wants to do?
No, he won't at all. But the problem he'll have is that I tell you that the way it's been explained to me, that if you play in Babcock's top 2 lines, he leaves you alone offensively.
Right.
But what he does demand is accountability on your performance level on a daily basis, and that's where he would run into Kessel. Kessel can be in and out, as we know.
Yeah.
He's a goal scorer. He's streaky. Over the course of a season, he's been very consistent. But Babcock's not going to come. He's not as defensive as Claude Julien. He's been playing puck possession since he got to Detroit.
Right.
He's been a puck possession guy. But what he is into is accountability. He is very demanding, and when you have your job, you better do it every day to the best of your ability. And that would be the difference. If I was Phil Kessel. And this is my note to Phil. Phil, you should call Brendan Shanahan today and say, Brendan, move me, because you're not a good mix. You're not a good mix for Mike Babcock. He will not enjoy the Babcock experience. We know your personality, and you're better off. And I don't understand this. Phil Kessel is a valuable commodity.
Yeah,
sure.
Very valuable commodity. He's a consistent goal scorer. I know this year he fell off the table. I think he was among the leading disinterested parties in Toronto. He didn't. But if I was in Arizona or Florida or Nashville, I'd be calling up trying to get Phil Kessel, because I think and don't try to tell me that you can't win with Phil Kessel.
I don't think they'll have a problem trading Kevin.
No. But I'm saying, but people are going to say, well, those teams that are on the rise. The Panthers, for example, think they're going to make the playoffs and they're starting to rise. But if you plug Phil, I say this all the time, but it's true. You plug him in on the Kings last year. You telling me they wouldn't have won the cup? Of course they would.
Yeah.
And when the Leafs made the playoffs, he was one of their best players.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying he can't be a contributor. I'm just saying he's not a fit with Babcock. I don't think he's a fit with Toronto, with the massive media market in Toronto. And it's beneficial to his career, and it's beneficial to the Leafs organization that they go their separate ways, and I think they will.
I agree completely. I don't think that's. I mean,
Yeah.
You've dealt with Kessel too, Ty. Your thoughts on this?
I think Kessel is he's timid around the media, but when he's on the ice, he's unquestionably one of the best talents, I think, in this league. And honestly, I look at his playoff resume. He was a point-per-game player for the Boston Bruins in 2009 in the playoffs with a torn shoulder. I mean, that's, I can't question his heart when it really matters. And I do think that he was great for Toronto in their 7-game series with Boston in 2013. And that's what really stuck out to me. He embraced the challenge of going against Zdeno Chara like I've never seen him before. He knew the stage, and he knew the importance of playing well, and he played well, and he took that Game 7 loss harder than I think anyone else in that Toronto room. Maybe James Reimer is the only other guy that I saw, and I was like, wow, he's taking this hard. But I think, if Kessel does get a change of scenery, you will see a more relaxed and a more energetic Kessel. I mean, if you sent him to Florida, I think he'd be in heaven. No, not a lot of media coverage. He gets to go golfing. He gets to go by the beach. He gets to do all the stuff he wants to do. He gets to go fishing, and he gets to live his life, and he gets to play hockey. And it's really, that's kind of the big thing for him. I think is he wants to be comfortable, and he just seems so uncomfortable in Toronto. So I think even with Babcock there, I just still think that a change of scenery would be best for him. But, I mean, honestly, like Kevin said, I mean, if you put him on a playoff team, he's an unbelievable player, and he makes that team that much better. And I can't refute that at all.
Let me tell a story about Phil Kessel that I've always remembered. In his draft year he was playing at the World Junior Championships, and I was sitting with a scout, and Kessel made that move that everybody has seen him make, where he slams on the brakes. It's almost like in the Top Gun when Tom Cruise would hit the brakes and the MiG would fly by him. Kessel doesn't do that. What he does is he sort of hits the brakes, and the defenseman stops, and then he shifts left. And I remember the pro scout kind of snorted and said, well, I'd like to see him try that in the NHL because they'll take his head off when he does it. Okay? Well, guess what? I've watched Phil Kessel for a lot of years, and I've seen him make that move at the NHL level. That same move. He hits the brakes. The startled defenseman sort of steps back, and then he shifts left and then drives the net. So, he's a great player, and, some players are not good fits in certain cities or with certain coaches, and I think if you get him elsewhere, he can still be a valuable contributor. Will he ever be everything you want him to be? No. But, all players are flawed. All human beings are flawed. So,
no, it's a great
podcast is flawed. So
yes, for sure. I am not flawed, but besides that, yes. No. I mean, no, the whole thing, obviously, I mean, I think that the media's killed Kessel for sure, along with it. He's done himself in. You can't blame the media on everything, right? But the one thing and I'm usually not about this whole Toronto media thing and how powerful they are and but yesterday there were a couple things in that press conference that made me think that Shanahan's, and this shocked me, that he's actually paying attention to the media more than I ever thought he would before, because the one thing was how much he talked about when they made this offer. Like, he kept saying, we made this offer the first day we saw him. This is the offer we made right away. This is the offer. It never changed. This is the first, and and Babcock said the same thing. They were on point, and I didn't even know why. I'm like, I was trying to, because I wasn't following the whole Buffalo thing. So I was like,
I'll tell you why, Ak. Because
no, I know why now, because of the way the Buffalo thing played out. And there was all this controversy as to when did Babcock go and play one against the other, and did he play, and they were trying to get. But when this whole thing's happening, I didn't know that was going on, and I'm just thinking to myself, wow, that's really open of them to I was just thinking, why do they keep saying this? It's something you usually don't ever hear, And Shanahan was blatant, and I agree with you, Ty. He was very legitimate. Like, he came off as honest as anybody I've seen in a while. Like, there were moments when he was just really down to earth, flat out down to earth in this press conference. I also think that there's a bit of, I mean, the one criticism that Shanahan has had against him so far in his little over a year tenure as team president is that he hasn't been
as engaged as people would like. I mean, he had one press conference after Carlisle was fired, and then the next press conference he held was when they suspended Kadri, and then the next one was when he announced the firing of Nonis, the scouting staff, and almost everybody else in the organization. He really wasn't front and center media-wise, and there was a lot of criticism of him sort of like just being not engaged. And I think one of the things that he showed by saying, I went over to Prague and we made this offer right away, was that they wanted to show, I'm engaged. I'm interested in making this team the best team that I can, and here's the proof. I went out and got the guy who I think is going to be the success story for this organization.
Yeah, it was there. That was completely there. And then they went out of their way to say that. They went out of the way to say a few things. Babcock, was a good. I mean, I got the impression that the difference between Buffalo, like you talked about, Kevin, Kevin and I, we had talked about this before. The Buffalo Toronto thing is like, Buffalo fans are one way, Toronto fans are another way. Buffalo seems like a lot more appealing to be in a rebuild, but I guess at the end, but when Buffalo were saying he had to go back to his wife and ask, I guess they decided that Toronto was more interesting to live in for the next 8 years, and maybe it's as simple as that, like that's how it. But I think that's maybe, and while that's part of it, I can't help but think that this also has something to do with the Canadianism, the Canadianness of him. At the end of the day, don't you think so, Kev?
Sure, you're right on.
I mean, I think that definitely, he's a big, he's obviously. A proud Canadian, and this was definitely something he wanted to do. And he said that too, and that was good, but, I don't know. It's going to be so fascinating to watch. It's going to take up too much of our time. We're going to have to stop talking about it. But it's going to be one of these things. It's going to be...
I'll be writing about it every day, Ak.
No. And but this... They've actually taken it to another level now, because now I want to see how this way of doing it works, because I think making excuses before you start is not the way to do it, and I just do not. I don't like this. I mean, I don't like the way it's being handled, and I get why it's being handled that way. But I think the past is the past, and in sports, you say that guy screwed up. Brian Burke screwed up. You don't have to make up for that now in your press conference by playing down things. I mean, that's what they're doing. They're making up for Brian Burke's sins in their press conference, in their heads, because they listen to the people in the media talk about Brian Burke's sins over and over and over again. So now they're like, okay, we're going to tell you why it's not, and forget it. It's done, That was done. This is now. You got it. You got this. Get our confidence. Go try to win some hockey games, and let's not let these kids like Morgan or these young players you're talking about, Mike, let's put them in a winning environment right away. Let's not have them be in a losing environment for the next 3 years. Darren Dreger comes out and says, the Leafs expect to be worse than they were this year for the next 3 years.
Well,
that's like asking that. I mean, that's lowering expectations lower than like the expectations are for the. I don't know, like the.
Last thing about this, the Leafs and Shanahan aren't listening to the media on this. They're owned by the media. They're owned by Bell.
Well, no, I know that, and I know that that's true. So maybe that's what's happening. I mean, maybe that's. I'm looking for the reasoning behind this bizarre press conference. Maybe I don't know. Maybe that's it.
The board of directors of MLS&E over the last year. I mean, they did not give John Ferguson Jr. and I think it was 2005 or 2006 after the lockout the go-ahead to go through the full rebuild, to get rid of guys like Sundin and an aging Ed Balfour and McCabe and those players to trade them off and rebuild. They didn't. They gave the thumbs up to Brian Burke to do it, and then he decided not to do it. In this instance, they've taken so much heat over the last 5 years for the Kessel deal, for the Phaneuf deal, for the collapses, that they're going to say, okay, fans, you want pain and suffering, you're going to get pain and suffering. We're going to rebuild. We're going to do it the way you want to, and we'll see how it goes. That's what they're doing. You give the masses what they want, and here you go.
We're not going to blow up the Death Star, but here's Luke Skywalker.
I will say that Mike is doing an excellent job of representing the Toronto fan.
No, I agree, and
I mean that sincerely. I think you're speaking just the way they view it.
But there are some things that just are weird that you're saying.
To me, it's just amusing. But I will say this, and again, this is just my knowledge of Babcock. None of this to him will matter. Like, all this is just noise. And like he has, what are those called? Noise headphones, noise
reducing. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. He has those built into his head. Like, okay, like none of this. Like, well, he will not pay any attention.
Kevin, he even said it yesterday. He says, when things are going good, I'll look at the newspaper every once in a while. When things are going bad, I listen to a country music station that has no news about the NHL. That's his.
Like that. Like he is so well equipped.
Yeah.
To handle Toronto. Like the Toronto media is going to be thinking they're having all kinds of impact with him, and he will not even know. It will not register on his radar whatsoever. Noise, because he's got noise canceling headphones on at all times, and it just
Well, I'll repeat, yeah, you're right, and I'll repeat one thing that was said yesterday that Kelly Rudy said, which I thought was brilliant, and the best analysis of the entire press conference yesterday was that he said that the one moment in the press conference that mattered to him, that stood out to him, was when Babcock said, "I will protect my players," and that I thought was huge, and then they started talking about, whenever you go around Detroit, the media could be there, whatever, but the players are always relaxed. They know that the organization has their back. They're safe. They feel okay. And if Babcock can do that, that's a huge accomplishment in and of itself, right? Because the players definitely don't feel that way now in Toronto.
No.
So I guess that rings a bell.
Did someone just become an angel, or what happened?
Yes,
there?
I know. But anyway, this is always fast. Now let's briefly, really briefly, because we got to go. But this is just such an incredibly fascinating situation. I just had to talk about it again with Kevin. But Kevin, and Ty, let's talk a little bit about tonight. I mean, here we are. This is Game 4. Kevin, you always say Game 4 is the game, right?
Oh, well, for sure it is, and it's the same old storyline, but it's a good one, which is that your best players have to be your best players. Like, look at the top 6 scorers on the Tampa Bay Lightning, and 5 of those top 6 scorers are in the top 8 in scoring in the NHL playoffs. And contrast that with what's going on with the Rangers now, where Rick Nash hasn't scored in forever. And Martin St. Louis, and I get it that he shouldn't be viewed as a top player anymore, but he scored 20 goals in the regular season, and he's a well-paid player. He hasn't scored at all in the postseason, and the shock to me is just Henrik Lundqvist. 12 goals in 2 games. He's lost 5 times now to the Rangers this season and given up 26 goals.
Yeah.
And it's incredible that I hate to say this, but it almost seems like the Lightning are in his head. Like he said after the post game, after that last game, that he somehow couldn't track Kucherov's shot.
Yeah.
I mean, that was from 35 feet. Or 40.
Yeah, that was a bizarre comment. I heard that too. I know.
Yeah, he couldn't track a shot. So this is a classic case of they can't trade goals with Tampa and win, and they have to play 2-1 hockey, and they got to get something out of their top players, because Tampa Bay's top players, all of them, are playing at a high level.
Oh,
well, that's what I don't understand, Kevin, is they were playing that 1-goal defensive shutdown game. They were famous for. They what is it, 15 straight games that they won, right, that they had won, or the game was a 1-goal game. Yeah. And the last 2 games, there's been a departure there, because 12 goals in 2 games. They can't corral the Palat, Kucherov, Johnson line. Stamkos has got online offensively. Hedman has become more of an offensive weapon than he was in the first 2 series. And Ben Bishop, even though he didn't play great in Game 3 and gave up 5 goals, he's 10-1 against the Rangers throughout his career. And you put that up against what Lundqvist has done against the Lightning. I mean, tonight the Rangers have to go back to that shutdown style. If they try to trade offense with the Lightning, they're going to lose, because they can't.
But if you and I'll let Ty go into the second, but I want to kind of rebuttal on that. But the problem is that what you're discounting here is this has nothing to do with what the Rangers aren't doing. It has everything to do with what the Lightning are doing. Like, the Lightning's top players have taken off. They're off the pad. They're hurtling. Yes. They're hurtling.
Exactly.
And the Rangers haven't been able to figure out what to do about that. And meanwhile, their top players are still on the launch pad. We don't even have them. The boosters aren't even firing. They're just sitting there. So that's the difference.
Ty?
One of the things that the Rangers do really well is that they activate their defense, especially in the offensive zone. They typically have one of their guys fly in low, and he creates a secondary option. Now, what's been happening when I've been watching these games is that the forwards, are not playing their games that complement that style. You see McDonough go low, you see a Dan Buller go low. He got the game time goal by doing that. But besides that, the success there has been very, few and far between. And that's because that the Rangers' offensive weapons are not anything close to a threat right now.
Right.
So really, it allows the Lightning to focus on that defense and streak into the zone. And then when the Lightning get the puck, they're flying the other way, and the Rangers have to play catch-up. So this has been a huge issue, I think, for the Rangers this series. They're not going to win this series if they're all 5-4, 6-5 kind of games. They don't have the weapons, especially right now.
Yeah.
So I think that's a huge thing, and you're seeing this. You're seeing this more as the series goes on. You're seeing McDonough and you're seeing Girardi. You're seeing these guys get low. They're going between the circles, really trying to make offense happen for this team. And I think it's starting to put a strain on them. Especially when their defensive zone game. They're getting beat to pucks and they're not as strong and as physical as they can be. I just think they're winded, and I think that's coming back to really hurt the Rangers right now in a lot of ways. And you got to get St. Louis scoring. You got to get Rick Nash scoring. The Tampa Bay Lightning right now have a bottom six that the other day featured Ryan Callahan. What are you going to do in that situation? You don't have the weapons to combat that. And so I just think the Rangers
could use Ryan Callahan in the worst way right now, couldn't they? Like Ryan Callahan's exactly what they need to go against Tampa.
Exactly, and I think you've seen Dominic Moore's played well, and I would even throw James Shepherd in there. I think these are supporting cast members. They've played well. But at this time of year, you need your stars to show up. And right now, they don't have Zuccarello, and that's when you need a St. Louis and a Nash to take offering right now. They look like a mess, and they just look gassed. They look winded. They don't look like they can hang with the Tampa Bay Lightning. And Henrik looks like he knows it too.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the issue. Maybe the lack of confidence we're seeing in Henrik is his realism to know that the boys can't do it against his team. But it's also team-wide on this sort of offensive drought. Like Carl Hagelin, and I don't want to pick on him because he always looks dangerous out there and he's fast. But I looked at his numbers and compared them to the last season, and he's not having the same level of impact. He's been -4 in the last 2 games. Chris Kreider, a guy who has produced during these playoffs, didn't have a shot on goal in that 6-5 game. He's had 2 shots in the last 4 games. Now he's been productive, but you can't in the playoffs. You can't take one night off. You can't go a game when you don't get a shot on goal. When you're that important to that team. And Ty's analysis was right on the money. They don't have Zuccarello, so they got to have everybody on the oars. And right now the oars are really out of sync. Some guys got his paddles in, and some are out. They're just not moving in the same direction. And I'm going to practice coaching, which is always dangerous. But I was thinking the other day, Vigneault, he's got 3 shutdown defensemen. And he has Girardi and McDonough play together, and then he's got Stahl. So I'm sure the way he's thinking is, I can match up against both of their top lines. But, Stahl's numbers, like his Corsi rating is the worst on the team. And it's really not that he's playing terrible, but it's that these Lightning guys are really good. Okay. So, does it make sense to maybe put one of those guys on all 3 defensive pairings? And
right.
I don't know.
You're getting the Yandel Boyle is getting killed.
Yeah, well, Yandel and Boyle, I think, have actually played well.
No, they played well in the offensive zone, but they're so susceptible.
No, they are. No, you're right. But I was just thinking that I don't know. It's worth trying. At some point. So.
Yeah, Russ was on yesterday and said, "Go ahead, Mike. Was that what you were gonna say?"
No. I was gonna say that. Brian Boyle coming back in Game 2 and being an effective depth player is really, I think, thrown the balance off in terms of the Tampa's advantage with their bottom 6. And the other thing is that in Game 2, Cooper went to 11 forwards and 7 defensemen, providing a matchup problem for the Rangers, double shifting Stamkos. And I think they continued that in Game 3. Now Matt Carl is out, and I think is it Barberio who's going to be replacing them?
Yeah.
He hasn't played much in the playoffs, so that's going to be something to be on the lookout for, because that means probably increased ice time for guys like Nestorov And I'm not sure they want him to get a lot of extra ice time, but we'll see.
I love Nesterov though. I get that he's a defensive liability, but man, he's an effective puck mover.
Oh,
He's fun to watch. And you know what? I don't even know that it matters who's in their bottom six forwards. I'm speaking of the Lightning. If those top six keep playing like the way they are, I mean, holy gosh, they're just.
But it's nice to have Brendan Morrow, nice to have Boyle.
No, I get it.
Yeah, Brendan Morrow, for the amount of, look what he's doing compared to what Marty St. Louis is doing. Like Brendan Morrow, is outplaying him, and he's barely playing at all. But when he gets out there, he's making an impact. You're really seeing, like last year, the Rangers really depended heavily on Dan Boyle and Benoit Pouliot. Like they were big players for them last year, and they're missing them, right? That's what it feels like to me. They don't have those kind of players.
I will tell you though that seeing Brendan Morrow in the dressing room, he looks like he's held together with Band-Aids and safety. Yeah,
he's amazing to me though. He's
got a lot of miles on it. He's like the Volvo that's got 380,000 miles. And I think, didn't you own that car? Yeah.
I own 6 of them, I think.
We talk about Nesterov, and this is when these guys, they get that chance, they don't look back. Like Torrey Krug in 2013, injuries and what have you forced him into the lineup against the Rangers in the second round, and he scored at a prolific rate, really. This is the stage where those guys come out. So, I think it's a bit dicey if some of these guys don't have experience, but that might be a benefit to them. They're not going to be overwhelmed by this moment because they realize that, well, they're the only guy there. So why not just play the game? And I think John Cooper is. I can't say enough great things about this guy. I just think he's a tremendous coach. He's really learning on the fly here what it takes to coach in the playoffs and coach at this level in the playoffs. And I think he's made a lot of adjustments that I was sort of calling for earlier. Some doubts and questions that I had that he's really addressed. And you can tell this Lightning team, they buy into what he's selling, and that's so key this time of year, and I think goes a long way. And especially when you're coaching against a guy like Alain Vigneault, who's been to 2 Stanley Cup Finals. He's been through tons of overtimes and Game 7s and everything in between. So I think this is really showing off Cooper's skills as a coach too.
Yeah.
One interesting thing: if you like John Cooper as a coach, you will also like Jeff Blashill, who's going to take over the Red Wings.
Same kind of guy.
Very similar type guy, very modern, communicator, quick-witted, can handle the media without much, issues. Can make a joke about, day to day.
That's great.
Like John Cooper did today. So.
Babcock sort of almost slipped and said that he was taking over in Detroit yesterday. Did you hear that in the press conference? There was a little moment where he said, we have 5, well, soon to be 5 coaches besides me that from the Red Wings organization that are coaching in the NHL. He basically just said,
he said it in a radio interview in Toronto yesterday. He said Jeff Blashill's going to be the next head coach.
I guess it's not a secret, but I want to know this: is Alain Vigneault gutsy enough to pull Lundqvist in this series?
No, and he should.
All right. What? But yes, I agree. Lundqvist can't do anything more.
Well, he doesn't have Carter Hutton. So.
Yep. Damn it, Kevin, you beat me to it.
All right, but listen, I know that this is not Lundqvist's fault at all. But there is a theory that I've always professed to, that when you're trying to get your team to play defensive style, you put in another goalie. This is they might be relying on Lundqvist too much here to think he's going to stop every breakaway that goes the other direction.
I'm going to stop you right there. Here's the bigger theory.
Mm-hmm.
When you have the face of the franchise, a guy who, his teammates adore and everything else, you don't insult them like that. That would be insulting.
No, I agree. I do agree, but
before that, he had gone 10 of 11 games when he gave up 2 or fewer goals.
Oh yeah, no, I know. I'm just saying that we got if you got this guy, it was part of the reason you got the President's Trophy in your bench.
Yeah.
If Cam Talbot is in net, the first camera pans to the press box and shows Glenn Sather chewing on his cigar, and then the camera points to the bench where Henrik Lundqvist, his $8 million goaltender, is drinking water without his helmet on. You cannot.
You just want to win.
I mean, this isn't Terry Lettinen and Johan Hedberg in Atlanta.
Right.
You know, this is Henrik Lundqvist.
I know that, but I had the same argument with Vigneault, with Luongo and Schneider back in the Stanley Cup Finals when I was, you know, it was obvious that Luongo had to be pulled, but you know there was nothing he wasn't going to do.
Yeah, but that was still a little bit different because Schneider was nipping at his heels, and everybody knew that.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, that was a legitimate beef that you had with him there.
Yeah.
This like Ty said, you know, this isn't Mrazek and Jimmy Howard. You know, this is the second best goalie in the Eastern.
No, I agree, but he's like you said, Kevin. He's given up how many goals, and he hasn't beaten this team. If they're inside his head, I mean, what point if they lose 8-1 tonight, or I mean, what?
This is the argument against having the good backup because
Because you might win if you put him in.
No, you're going to win or lose with Lundqvist. That's the reality.
Right.
Not to say that Cam Talbot can't win a game, but I mean, I think it raises a whole slew of questions and a lot of crap that'll be out there.
But what about just changing the goalie because the team needs a change? Like you do pull goalies without it being the goalie's fault.
Yeah. No, you're right on that. And
it's too much of a risk.
It is too much of a risk, and just because, and there has to be some form of loyalty. But you know, the argument for it would be, you know, why in baseball is it acceptable to, you know, change the rotation and, you know, guy goes 3 innings and you pull him, you know, but we can't do that in hockey.
Yeah, I guess not. All right, well,
not with the Stars.
I'll lose that battle. But anyway, that's all the time we have for today, guys. Awesome show as always. Thank you so much, Ty, Kevin, Mike. Thanks so much for coming on today, as always. Awesome. Have a great weekend. Who knows? We may have a Stanley Cup final when we meet again on Monday. I guess it's possible. And you know, it could be. It feels like probable in some way, shape, or form that we're inevitably going to be going back and forth between Tampa and Anaheim, Kevin. It just feels that way.
Wow, that's a lot of miles.
And it's not exactly a high publicity Stanley Cup final for the NHL either. It's not quite New York and LA like last year.
No, they would be pretty bummed out.
It's the Sun Belt final.
Yeah, wouldn't that be something? All right, guys. Without the buzz, it is just hockey. Have a great weekend.